welcome back to the Berlin studio again. And we saw that you've been discussing a lot in your respective breakout sessions. And thank you already for this great engagement. We're already curious to learn about your key solutions. But before we do that, I would like to introduce to you our expert panel as we are moving into the panel discussion now. And here with us today, I would like to introduce our panelists. Dr. Liu Zhi, you are the director of Peking University's Lincoln Institute Center for Urban Development and Land Policy. And you are conducting the center's research on policy advisory, training, and academic exchange on topics such as urban development, but also municipal finance and nature conservation. Welcome to this panel. We are very glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
You are also a member of the Council for Decarbonizing Transport in Asia that has recently been set up under the umbrella of the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, which has been introduced in the Showtime yesterday morning as part of the Transport and Climate Change Week as well. Next, we'll have Glynda Bathan-Baterina. You are the Deputy Executive Director of Clean Air Asia and also a member of the Council. With over 20 years of experience, you are an expert in policy development on clean air, clean fuels, and vehicles in the Asian region. For instance, you helped to draft the 1999 Philippine Clean Air Act with being a lawyer as a background. We are very honored to have you on this expert panel with us today. Good afternoon, Glynda. And third, but certainly not least, Mr. Sudhendu Sinha from Niti Aayog, you are an advisor for infrastructure connectivity and electric mobility with India's National Institution for Transforming India, the so-called government think tank of the Indian government. And your contributions in operations, infrastructure planning, and also policy making have been recognized and awarded twice at national and thrice at the ministry level. We are very glad to have you with us today and an excellent expert panel that we are going to discuss with in the next half hour. And with that, we'd like to start our panel discussion, and I'd like to hand it over to Christian, who will be co-moderating this panel discussion with me.
Thank you, Urda, and it's my great pleasure also to join this panel discussion, and we would like to organize it in 3 rounds. First, we start with an opening statement from the regions. Secondly, then we also try to integrate the discussions from the regional hubs and the workshops and the discussions you had during the break here in the hub. And then certainly we would like to wrap it up and to see what's the way forward. And I would like to start with Dr. Liu from China. And I already mentioned that I think it's really exciting to see that China has set and described new goals with regard to climate protection, that there is the goal to peak the emissions before 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2060. Dr. Liu, what do you think will be most important policies, especially in the transport sector, to come close to this really ambitious and exciting goals?
Thank you, Christian. It's good to see you here. For China, and as you all know, the Chinese government has announced the target for net zero by year 2060. And China is a highly centralized country and centralized political system. So the political will is there. And the question is how we go about it for the remaining 40 years in order to achieve the objective. So today, the key challenge is to come up with the time-bound action plan, which can be measurable, so that we can adjust the actions along the way. There are many years to go, but also So we don't know exactly what will happen in the future. Now, in the past 20 years, China has made some significant advance in carbon reduction by sector, but we are not doing very well by cities. So the key challenge will be with our cities, and that's especially important for transport, because land use, transport, and lifestyle industry locations are all in cities. And so I think that in the next step, we really need to find a good action plan that could be implementable in our cities. And it's going to be a huge challenge, but this is something and what I would think as a priority for us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liu. Cities are certainly a challenge. We'll be discussing more about cities during the rest of the Transport and Climate Change Week as well, tomorrow with a day on the Mobilize Your City partnership. Thank you for your initial statement and pointing out that China is already taking and has been taking important steps. You also mentioned the clear timeline for the roadmap towards decarbonizing transport is important. Next, we would like to ask Glynda, with your experience in clean air policy development, what do you think is important to bring climate targets into action on the ground?
Thank you very much, Urda. Indeed, a very important question to answer. And just to put a context, if we would look at Southeast Asia, which is really the 6th largest vehicle market in the world, there are many opportunities for decarbonizing the transport sector. First opportunity is that there's really high consumer readiness for electric mobility. So surveys showed that about 37% of consumers that intend to purchase cars would consider purchasing electric vehicles. And so this is already a very good starting point. But we know that there are challenges in EV uptake, and this includes high upfront cost, still range anxiety, the lack of charging points, and concerns on product quality, and the type of electricity generated to power the electric vehicles. So if we speak of policies, we have to prioritize the policies that will bring the cost of electric vehicles at parity with the internal combustion engine vehicles. And this is key. This can be done by making clear signals to the market that the countries are ready for EVs. Maybe by having a target number of EVs by a specific year, or setting a target year when internal combustion engine vehicles will no longer be allowed on roads. So within this region, Southeast Asia, only Indonesia and Singapore have set a phase out of ICEs by 2040. Next policies would be the incentives. This would include incentives not just for the manufacturers, but also purchase incentives for the EV buyers. And these incentives can come in the form of fiscal incentives and non-fiscal incentives, which have been found to be very effective in increasing the uptake of EVs in the developed countries. And if we speak of purchase subsidies in the developing Asia region, this is a tricky matter to discuss and something which requires innovation. Now, innovative ways of raising this financing is needed. And thankfully, there are some good examples like the Delhi Air Ambience Fund that uses the polluters pay principle to raise funds to subsidize the purchase of EVs. And now, lastly, I was very struck by the concern on the type of electricity generated to power EVs. So the power that should be used to electrify EVs must be clean energy. And this is very important for this region, Southeast Asia, for example, where the pipeline for coal-fired power plants continues to be quite large. And so the very first step is to clean up these existing coal plants. Next would be to retire the old coal plants and then set a moratorium for new plants. And third, get more renewable energy online. I think these are the key policies we need to decarbonize road transport in this region.
Thank you very much, Glynda. You already described a very comprehensive set of policies which will lead the way forward for electrification of road transport, especially passenger cars. So I would directly hand over to Mr. Sinha from Niti Aayog. India was already described by Glynda, has a lot of targets and ambitious targets in the field of electrification of road transport, but also with regard to extending the amount of renewable energies for the sector coupling that, the electrified cars are also driving more and more on renewables. So, Mr. Sinha, what is the recipe for India with regard to policies to drive these ambitious targets, for example, to raise EV sales to 30% by 2030 in the new sales fleet? Looking forward to your ideas and plans.
Yes. So as you yourself said in the beginning, that zero carbon transport, achieving that mission, that stage, is not a simple thing. It is a very, very most difficult and complicated challenge because it relates to consumer behavior, and there cannot be any technological or only business solution to it. It has to be a host of solutions. If we see the specific problems, 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, then the upfront cost of the electric vehicles, this has to match that of the ICE counterparts. The charging infrastructure, the support infrastructure has to be positioned fast. There has to be a national awareness campaign so that the myths and the anxieties among the consumers that could be addressed. The supply chain, the domestic R&D has to be on a very sound footing. And finally, when the resources are less, you can't thinly spread it all across the geography and population. You have to create lighthouse cities. In India, very recently, say around 15 days back, we have taken 3 major initiatives. First is with regard to two-wheelers, we have gone in for increasing the existing incentives so that the price of the upfront cost of two-wheeler of electric two-wheeler is almost as same as compared to the ICE counterpart. Because now for the consumers, the total cost of ownership parity, those logic just do not work. They want specific reduced upfront cost. Second is, of course, that we have for the three-wheelers, we have gone it for an aggregation model. So one of our agencies will be purchasing three-wheelers in a big number, some 300,000 to start with. And for the buses, we are going to identify, show our presence in specific cities with population of 4 million plus, 9 cities only. We will do the intervention, and once we create those lighthouse cities, the fragrance will spread over. It will have a cascading impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for building on what Glynda said on electric mobility and giving us more insights about the situation in India and the ambitious actions that you're taking. I think what we can take from this discussion of round one is that price signals are very important. It's also about reducing the upfront costs in the case of electric vehicles. But overall, I think getting the prices right in order to incentivize the use of sustainable transport. Now, though, we would like to hear from our regional hubs that have been discussing key solutions in their respective countries. And we are going to ask a rapporteur from each of the hubs to let us know what is your key solution. And I'd like to start with Eastern Europe. Could you let us know what is the key solution to decarbonize transport by 2050 in Eastern Europe? And I heard that I think Sophia will present their solution. Here she is.
Yes, hi Urda, hi Sophia Sundar from Kiev here live. Sorry, yes, we had not the most active participation, but on behalf especially of Georgian colleagues, I am allowed to share some of our thoughts. In the discussion, especially some barriers were identified with regard to a lack of vision, not actually with regard to something else, but rather that there is maybe a lack of vision how the actual decarbonized transport system in Eastern Europe cities should look like, and then identify based on this vision on which sector or which mode to focus on. So this was identified as one of the main barriers. And then when it comes to key solutions, as you asked us, there was a lot of focus in our discussion on that we need to establish a grid for the renewables, especially maybe because we had our electric mobility day yesterday in the Eastern Europe Hub. So really focusing on the access to clean renewables, which would then be key to decarbonize our cities. And there was also a little bit of a hint with regard to, we also heard this right now in the panel, with regard to the image that some decarbonized transport modes have, and that there needs to be clear communication and maybe also a campaign to address these images and make this more fun and give all of those a better image. Also here in Eastern European countries, since their combustion engines or especially private vehicles still have a high image and are really something strived for. So these were our key barriers and our key solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Yeah, sorry, Christian, I don't want to take the floor from you.
No, it's your floor. I think it's...
We're sharing the floor equally. So let me take this question from Sophia. We heard vision is important. Campaigning, Mr. Sinha also mentioned this, really taking people along. This is also something that the Council for Decarbonizing Transport has been discussing. We are in this together, so this is very important. And then the grid for renewable energies. But I would like to take this question back to Liu Zhi. We already have a vision in China, and what could you maybe recommend? You also mentioned the importance of cities, about the vision at the city level. What do you think you could maybe recommend or react to that situation of a lack of vision and the bad image of public transport and other sustainable modes?
In China, I think if you look at the government action or the action of the society and business in reducing the carbon emission in urban transport, is the electrification of vehicles in city. Now, if you visit the city of Shenzhen, you would notice all the buses and taxis are powered by battery now. And so it's an achievement for over just a few years. So technologically, it would be possible for public transport and commercial vehicle to be electrified. But for personal vehicle, and that would depend on the industry policy to phase out fossil fuel vehicle. But that's still very much doable. Now the question is that, and transport is a derived demand. As I mentioned earlier, in cities, only electrifying urban transport is not enough. And we will need to do a lot in the electricity supply. That is the cleaning and greening of electricity supply. And we don't have many options. And China is a country that based on coal as the major source of energy. So in the future, and I think on top of that, for transport and electrification is the key. But then on the foundation, the major challenge is really in the greening of electricity supply, and that would be much of the work we need to focus. But in addition to that, and there are also many things we can do, like urban form and the lifestyle, and also industry location, and the few things that I mentioned a bit earlier. And we need to understand what would be the better urban land use pattern, and that would support the kind of urban transport to minimize carbon emission.
Thank you very much.
Stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liu. I think, and we know us from my time also in Beijing quite well already, that definitely Asian cities, due to their size, definitely have a higher pressure to transform transportation in the cities, in the mega cities especially, which are uncomparable bigger than they are in Europe or in other places in the world. But this pressure on change is really also a source for innovation, so it goes faster. That's why it's not only that, you know, we see that emerging economies in developing countries can learn from the industrialized world with transforming transport, but it's also the other way around, that we learn from the innovative approaches in cities like in Asia, that we can also learn something on the policy implementation roadmap. So this is why we would like now go to our Asia regional hub, which is more to the east then. And I think, if I'm informed right, that you are based now in Vietnam and also had some discussions. And I would like to learn a little bit about what do you see as a key solution for this huge effort to decarbonize transport in Asian cities or in Asia in whole. So looking forward to get your comments.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm actually based in Jakarta, but it's okay, it's in the same region. So I'm gonna walk you through our fruitful discussion that we had during this 25 minutes, and I will just focus on the urban passenger transport, because it's really a thing that connects all of us. We all live in cities, so we are all connected somehow in urban transport to move around the cities. So what are the key barriers that we encounter to urban transport? It's the behavior and lack of political will or priorities in the political system. We are also having lack of charging infrastructures. Sorry, my computer is lagging. So yeah, lack of charging infrastructures, as well as the lifestyle is not really fit the urban transport way of moving. We also have encountered problem with accessibility around the urban passenger transport. So as we have all these barriers, what are the main solution to tackle them? So the first one is to have many incentives around zero emission vehicles or around behavior change, as well as awareness raising campaigns to address myths and tackle anxieties toward a more decarbonized way of moving. We also find that we have to give more training around zero emission transportation. And also, last but not least, we should improve the monitor and evaluation of all this decarbonization transportation to see if those actions are actually worked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Imane from Indonesia. We heard more about urban mobility now. Incentives, awareness raising, and interestingly though, you raised another point that we hadn't heard before, the importance of monitoring and evaluating what is actually happening on the ground, and the importance of informing our policy making through data and also measuring progress. So thank you very much for these insights, and I would like to take them and address them to Mr. Sinha in India. Of course, urban mobility has been mentioned before. What would you say to the colleagues in Indonesia? How to move forward on providing incentives and awareness raising? I think you have a Switch Daily campaign, for instance, so that might be an aspect that could be interesting.
I would suggest that they could create first a national mission, which can be a kind of interministerial kind of body that can take the entire transformative mobility forward. That is stage one. In stage two, they have to identify that what is the differential and what all they could take in, provide incentives from the government to start with, so that the price parity could be achieved. That is a stage two. Number three, they could also create an ecosystem where in the urban mobility, the municipal authorities and the other road authorities, they are able to showcase and give preference to electric mobility, electric vehicles as compared to their ICE counterparts. That is the third one. And finally, as I said in my own outpouring in the beginning, that you have to create cities which can be just the islands of excellence, and subsequently you will see for yourself that how it will travel. And finally, a national campaign is required, because consumers are not as aware as you or me, we think them to be. They have to be made aware. Their anxieties with respect to range, infrastructure availability, with respect to so many things, they have to be taken care of. Then only it will be able to create the entire thing. So, to conclude, a holistic approach, a combined approach is required. And I'm sure once you are resolute, when the government has taken a call on this, this is doable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha. So a call for a national mission for sustainable transport. Thank you very much. And last, we would like to look, but certainly not least, into our Africa hub. And here we have Mr. Kennedy Wafula from the Kenya Roads Authority with your key solution.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much. From Nairobi, the city in Kenya, we understand that the urban transportation challenge, one of the contributing factors is the congestion due to the intermodal transportation link, which is as a result of the urban planning challenge. The other issue is
I'm sorry, we currently have a sound issue and cannot hear you properly.
am I audible now?
Very clear.
Thank you very much. From Kenya, one of the challenges in terms of decarbonizing urban transport is the planning challenge, because We have a lot of intermodal transportation needs, and as a result, we experience congestion. The other one is most of the technology used for the HDVs is second-hand, basically diesel-based, and so they emit highly. The other issue is about the political will that is required. So one of the interventions is ensuring that we create incentives, like using PPP model to invest in electrifying our transport infrastructure. And then the other one is ensuring that we have all the stakeholders participate in the planning processes. So I think with that, then we are able to achieve more in decarbonizing our sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kennedy. And it's very good that you not only focusing on the question, how do we do this energy transition in urban transport? How do we succeed with the electrification of urban transport? But also the question of, how do we move around in the future in urban cities or in urban areas? Do we need privately vehicles, or do we have this goal of multimodality, intermodality, the mobility alliance between public transport, mobility solutions, and unmotorized transport? And in this regard, Glynda, I would like to ask one question to you. That is also, one of the big areas which Asia is really struggling with, that, even if we would electrify all vehicles very soon and very fast, we would still have a huge transport problem in urban areas. And what would be a solution, or what could be solutions to motivate people to use more public transport and to use more seamless public transport in combination of public transport with new mobility solutions and unmotorized transport?
Thank you, Christian, and thank you to our colleague from Africa. And this really is a similar challenge in developing Asian cities, addressing the mobility challenge. But we have to be mindful that in developing cities, there is actually quite a high percentage of passengers taking public transport modes. In the Philippines, for example, it's about 70 to 80% of people take public transportation. And so this becomes an opportunity to bring public transport into the modern world by actually electrifying public transport buses. But it is true that even the current public transport bus system is unable to really meet the mobility needs of our people. What we are seeing is there is an exponential increase in two-wheeler sales and registrations. And this for us becomes an opportunity to electrify this, it may be personal vehicles. However, if we can decarbonize two-wheelers, it would still help us reach our climate goals. This is another solution. And another is really to encourage more active transportation. We see that there are electric assist or pedal assist electric bicycles that can be integrated into our transport system, which encourages, this is a zero carbon transport that can help our mobility needs in developing cities. So I think we need this multimodal zero carbon transport system to meet our transportation needs in developing cities.
Thank you very much, Glynda. I think this is showing quite well also this, sneak view in our regional hubs, that there are at least, specific problems in the different regions, but nevertheless, challenges are comparable, and there are also solutions which can be not transferred directly, but can be seen as a motivation and as an idea also for solving problems elsewhere. And in this regard, I would now like to come to our final discussion and final question in this panel session. And this is, again, to our experts, which is about the question, we heard about a bundle of instruments, a series of solutions, measures or technology solutions, but not only technologies, but also how to organize transport in different ways and how to finance it. What would you think would be the next step? What is the first step now to take to come further on the road to decarbonize transport in at least mid-century or close to mid-century? In this regard, I would like to start again with Dr. Liu from China, asking the question, not what is a long-term perspective, but a very short-term perspective. What would be the next step, which is to take?
Yeah, well, I think today we know there are many things that we can do, but we still don't know what are more effective than others. And we don't know if a policy would provide some kind of incentive to behavior that may not be intended. And so I think at this point, we still need some research to inform policy making, to inform the planning of actions. And I heard from Mr. Sinha just a while ago the holistic approach, which I think is very important. And so I would say at the moment, we should do whatever prove to be effective, like electrification of vehicles and gradual phasing out of the fossil fuel vehicles and providing more charging infrastructures or so. But then at the same time, and there is a tremendous need to do holistic research about the package of actions in city that would be more effective. And we also need to learn how to manage the process, because we are going to face many uncertainties. For example, driverless vehicle will come to us very soon. What's the impact of driverless vehicles on public transport, and how we manage this? And do we continue the subsidy to public transport? And should we implement the congestion pricing or other pricing approach to address the behavior? I think that these are all the policy questions that we need to ask and come up with the kind of evidence and science-based solution.
So, thank you, Dr. Liu. Every long journey starts with the first step, and thank you very much for highlighting that also that there is some knowledge to create before to take the action, especially in times where we have to live with uncertainties, especially regarding technologies, but also regarding behavior change. So no one really has a clue how people will react if we change something in the system, and that's why knowledge creation and exchange of knowledge is also a very important tool for describing and forming the future of transport by policies. Glynda, I would like to come to you now, asking the same question from the perspective of Clean Air Asia. What would be the next step to take?
The next step to take would be to have a clear plan that is set by government that sends the right signals to consumers, to commuters, and to the service providers, to the public transport service providers. And in that plan, we should be able to see that public bus transport is going to be the first mode to be electrified because it is visible, it provides safe and efficient transport, electric transport to a large part of the population, and it will show that the technology works and allay the fears and the doubts on the reliability of the technology. And on the other hand, make sure that the power that is generated to electrify the vehicles is clean, and therefore start the shift to renewable energy to match the decarbonization of transportation. So I think this dual path should help Asia on the way to decarbonizing transport.
Thank you very much, Glynda. I think it's quite similar what Dr. Liu mentioned, that a clear plan based on knowledge and research is so important, highlighting not only the next step but also giving an outlook on the next steps and medium and long-term perspective, and linking the short-term perspective with medium and long-term perspective to give all the stakeholders in this field planning and investment certainty that they are on the right pathway. And in this regard, Mr. Sinha, I would like to come to you and close this round with the same question. What is the next step which will be taken in India for this huge effort to decarbonize transport from a national perspective? Mr. Sinha.
To both the moderators, what we are discussing today is basically a transformation from atom-based energy and transportation industries to bit-based and electron-based technology. Now, this is one of the most aspirational disruption of this civilization. How it can be achieved? Lot of shared global experience, understanding of international benchmarks and recalibrating your own, and lot of thinking through will be required to achieve it. We need to encourage nations, different bodies, our neighbors to take step towards this zero carbon transport. It could be it could be a small step, but as you yourself said, a small step for man, that would be a giant step for mankind. With that positive note, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha. I think, honestly speaking, we should close it here because it couldn't be more positive and more optimistic. But this is, I think, something which I really like, because there's a favorite saying by an American film director, Woody Allen, saying, confidence is what you have before you understand the problem. And the question is, can we have confidence that we will be successful with this effort to decarbonize transport until mid-century, especially not only in some regions, but globally? And to wrap it up, I would just like to quote a study which we were also conducting jointly with GIZ in the last years, asking several hundred experts globally, are they confident? Do they believe in the ability to decarbonize transport until mid-century? And honestly speaking, they were not so confident, especially because they were saying with the policies and actions which we are currently taking, we will not succeed. We need a different quality and different, pace in implementing policies for decarbonizing transport on the two pillars. On the one pillar, to erase fossil fuels in the use, in transport use, oil and gas, phase out and replace it more or less, as it was mentioned, by electrons, renewable electricity directly or indirectly, or avoid, shift and improve the transport modes or the transport volume to most environmental sound and most climate sound transport modes. Only if we can do both, then we will succeed, and only if we will do this jointly between the industrialized world and the emerging economies and developing countries. I think that was also an outcome of this study that, and it was mentioned and highlighted also several times in our session today, that this is a kind of prerequisite for decarbonizing this sector, which is definitely more challenging than only decarbonizing our energy sector, because it has to do not only with the energy transition in transport, but also with a change of behavior and how to move around in the future. And again, I was mentioning it at the beginning, we talked a lot about passenger transport, but we didn't manage it to also integrate some questions and discussions on freight, which is still, as I mentioned, one of the elephants in the room due to its predictions on the growth in this sector. But it only means that we have to continue this discussion and search for joint solutions. And in this regard, I think I would like to bring to you the positive spirit of Mr. Sinha, and cannot add more to it, and hand over for the closing of the session to my colleague Urda. And thank you very much for joining us. It was a great pleasure, and it was a great pleasure to do this jointly with you, Urda.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you also to our panelists, of course, from my side, Glynda, Dr. Liu, Mr. Sinha. And thank you also to all the participants discussing these ideas in the respective regional hubs. Thanks also to my colleagues moderating those hubs in the different regions. Even if more needs to be done, we've also seen in the discussion that a lot is already happening on the ground. And with that spirit of collaboration, that is exactly the spirit that we have in Transport and Climate Change Week, and that we want to continue over the next 1.5 days with the open sessions yet to come. I would like to therefore point out a few more things on the slide that is coming up. If you want more information on the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, we'll be continuing our work in the Asian region in that project for the next years to come, helping to decarbonize the sector. And you can also see our collaborating partners, apart from Agora and GIZ, down here. It's quite a large project, and we would like to contribute our small part to this decarbonization challenge. Next up is the coffee break, and I'll encourage you to join the coffee lounge to have more personal exchange on these topics. And please leave your ideas on our wall of ideas on the platform. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you very much, Christian, for being with us in the studio here today and connecting to the rest of the world. It was a great pleasure for us, and we're looking forward to connect in the other sessions.